Hey everyone, this is Matt with Learn Everything About Design, and in today's video we're going to do something a little bit different. This is not a how-to video, it's more of a review of 3D printed parts that I use every day. So over the holidays here, I had pre-made a bunch of videos that we put out, and I had planned to do more over the holidays, but things get a little crazy and get a little busy, so I just haven't made any new videos. So I thought this was a good time to just do a little bit of review of all of the 3D printed parts that I use on a daily basis. Some of them you've seen, some of them we've done videos on. For example, the key fob holder, we did a video in plasticity with that. The ones that I actually use are ones that I designed in Fusion before I did that video. Cell phone stands, things like that. Those are things that we've done videos on. Anytime in this video that I show you something that I use every day, I will put a link in the description to a video. I'll try to put a card on the screen, but I'm not great about that. To the original video where we designed that part. Another thing I do want to mention at the start of this video, so I'll put chapters down below so you can jump ahead to all the different pieces. But one thing I do want to mention is on our website, learneverythingaboutdesign.com, where we sell courses, we are going to be going through and doing a refresh on content that's affected. So obviously with Autodesk Fusion, the intent-driven design is shaken up how we interact with things. Our CAM course is the most recent, where we go through everything from 2-axis up to multi-axis machining. And the manufacturing workspace is likely to remain unchanged to the point where that content wouldn't still hold up. But there will be some areas where we need to understand things like hybrid assembly modeling versus the intent-driven design stuff. And so when we have courses like that that are only minor, minimally affected, what we're going to do is we're going to add some new content that talks about intent-driven design. We'll likely also point to the YouTube video that we did, and we'll talk about how to use Fusion as it is to kind of work with that course. And so we have to wait until the final release of intent-driven design comes out to everybody. Right now, it's a preview feature you can turn on. So when that happens, we'll be going through and we'll be updating some of this. Some of the courses are going to be less affected. And so some of the advanced courses, the surfacing and the forms modeling stuff, likely to be less affected or impacted. So those will get new videos that talk about intent-driven design. And then we'll make specific ones where we show you how to get started using the hybrid modeling approach. For our absolute beginner series, that is going to get a complete overhaul. It's the first series that we put on here. And that's going to get an overhaul. We'll likely do some overhaul to maybe game controller design and some of the other content that we had. So one important note here I want to make is that if you have purchased any of these courses, you will still have access to all of the updates that we make to them. We're just going to be swapping out videos and updating and changing the outlines where we can. And so if you bought, let's say, the Absolute Beginner Guide bundle, the 5-course bundle for like $35, when the new stuff comes out, you will still have access to all of the new stuff that comes in. When we do that update, the prices are likely going to go up a bit. The site we host on Teachables, they have upped their prices. And if I'm honest, the amount of courses that we sell barely breaks even with what we have to pay to keep the site going. And that doesn't really even account for the time. So right now it's basically a wash. And they're upping their prices as well. And so what we're going to do is, you'll probably see us making more courses this year and likely, again, doing promo videos like we do and pushing that kind of stuff. But just note that if you've already purchased something and it updates, you'll get an email when it updates and you'll still have access to it. You won't have to buy it again. If we're doing a complete refresh on something like the Absolute Beginner Bundle, the prices will likely go up. So right now, each of the 5 are $10. So if you just bought CAD design, it would be $10. If you bought the bundle of everything together, then that bundle is going to be $35. And again, those prices will likely be going up. So just keep that in mind. We also have some beginner series that likely will get a full overhaul to be beginner CAD design for 3D printing. That course we went through and did a a simple project, and I'll actually show some of those pieces in this video today. We did a simple project where we did a cable organizing clip, and then we did a cell phone stand that was an amplifier. I still use this from time to time, but not every day, so it's not one that we're looking at in this video. And then we also did a toy car launcher, which was an assembly of parts. This is likely to get an overhaul where we leave the original content. You'll still be able to see it and access it, but we're going to do a new version of this course. If you have purchased this course, then you will likely have access to that. I'm still designing it, so I'm not exactly sure how it's going to work out, but you'll likely have access to that. And again, some of the content will be bundled together. We'll be changing the prices and stuff like that, but just keep an eye on that. So if you've bought anything, don't worry, you will still have access to all that in the updated content. If you are thinking about buying, I would suggest buying like the beginner bundle now while it's $35, and then once we refresh it, you'll have access to it. If you wait until we update it and we raise the price a little bit, then you'll just be paying a little bit more. We're still planning to keep a very similar price structure. We try to make it as affordable as possible. I'm not going to start charging $150 for a beginner bundle course. We're still going to keep it reasonable, but it probably will go up to about $50 for the 5-part series. So just keep that in mind. So with all that said, now that we're 6.5 minutes in, let's go ahead and look at all the parts, the 3D printed parts that I use on a daily basis. Now, some of these you've seen again, some of them you've never seen before. And with all the emails and comments that I've got over the holidays about people just getting a 3D printer, starting to print their own parts, I think it's fun to see the kinds of things that we can use on a daily basis. Some of them are used to kind of keep old tech going, like a microwave. Some of them are completely new and things that just are used for organization or those different kinds of things. So this first one is one that probably is a bit odd. It's a microwave handle. And so my house is from the early 90s. A lot of the appliances, fixtures, things like that are still original. And so this is one that this is basically an over stove microwave and fan or vent. And so if you have kids or have something like that, like one of these from 30 years ago, when you pull down on the handle, like if you're a smaller person and you try to open it by pulling it down, the plastic pieces break. And so this original design had a aluminum metal piece between two plastic end pieces. I wish I would have kept the aluminum handle and I just tossed it. But when I got a full-size 3D printer, originally I had a micro 3D, which was like a 5-inch cube build size. I built just a little piece, like a little hook down here that we could use to open and close it. Once I got a full-size or a bigger build size, an Ender 7, I was able to just print this as one piece. And so that's been, it's probably been 4 or 5 years in use as just a basic PLA. And yeah, when I'm boiling water and steam rises up, it does get a bit softer if it's been, under steam for 45 minutes, but it's been perfect. It's worked for years and it's kept me from having to replace a microwave that works functionally. It just doesn't have a handle on it. And so I've actually seen a couple of videos online from different creators that have the same microwave and they have like door pulls from drawers that are just used to open it because, again, the microwave still works fine. It's just the brittle plastic that ended up breaking. So that's the first one, a microwave handle, something you probably wouldn't expect, but it works. And I just have it printed as white. I could redo it as a black part, but honestly, it works and I don't care. So it's just going to stay like that. All right. The next thing is also to fix 90s stuff that's breaking, and this is a fan. Now, this is an exhaust fan for a bathroom, and again, so this is an old fixture in the ceiling. It has a heater in it, and it also has an exhaust fan and lights, and the size prevents me from just getting a new replacement and putting it in the same place because it's not functionally the same size anymore. And so it would require me to do a lot of work and sheetrock work, and it just doesn't make sense. And so I found a replacement motor that was like $15, and it bolted right in place, and it works. But the problem was the fan that came with it that fit onto the shaft didn't fit into the housing. It was slightly too large. And so I didn't have just a direct swap. I tried to like take things apart and swap shafts and bearings between the motors, and it just didn't work out. So what I ended up doing was replicating or creating a 3D printable version of the original squirrel cage fan. And you can see there are tapers here because as it prints in this orientation, I didn't want to have supports in all of these, so I just had it flare out, and so that way it could print everything. And there was support that had to happen down here. I could have probably done this better, but it worked okay. I did print this without support. It gets a little ugly in the middle, but it printed okay. This was also done on the Ender 7 with a PETG material. And so the Ender 7 is an open frame. It doesn't have an enclosure on it. So it was a bit tricky, but this has been in use again for 5 years. Obviously it's a bathroom fan. It gets used every day, every time there's a shower. And so I was able to, for $15 and a little bit of PETG material, I was able to keep that going without having to replace the ceiling fan and the heater, which works. And it just keeps working, keeps going. So again, another use case that is maybe not the normal use case, but it helped me keep the rest of the stuff that already works and is wired in and just kind of keeps working. The next thing on the list, we did a video of this in plasticity. And so this is a key fob holder. I have a couple of these mounted on the wall in the garage, and they're great. They keep the keys up off of a tray, off of a shelf, out of the way, and keep them organized pretty well. Now, the ones that I use for my vehicles are done. I did them in Fusion, and these were ones that I just originally made for myself and ended up doing a video in plasticity on it. And again, sometimes that's what happens is I'll just make something for myself and not intend to make a video out of it. And then I end up getting a lot of functionality out of it, needing to do like a design for 3D printing course or video, and we'll just end up covering it. And so these work pretty well. You can design them in a way that you don't need support. So this prints pretty well without supports. When we're on constrained orbit, I can't rotate past Z very well, so that kind of sucks. I'll go to a top view here. And so as long as these don't curl over completely and the angle or the size of the radius is fairly large, you can get away with printing these things pretty quickly without support. So that's kind of a nice feature, but super handy. They don't have to be injection molded plastic. You can customize them for different key fobs, different keys, and just put a couple of like countersunk holes so you can screw them into the wall. And so like I said, I've got a couple of these hanging in the garage, and they work really well. The next things, and there's several of them that I use every day, are these cell phone stands. Now, this one is part of our series where we did a wireless charger. And so I'll put a couple pictures on the screen of that. This one was designed so that the phone can be docked in this position, or it can be sideways in sort of a landscape position. And I used all off-the-shelf parts from Adafruit. So all the wireless stuff is inside of there. There's the coil, and then there's a little PCB. So it's got a USB-A connector on it, and then it also has another one. It's that weird sort of USB micro connector. And so that, again, just an off-the-shelf component that you can use. And I use that every day. I keep that one in the bedroom. And then I also have another one that I use. This is a video that we did with like the power of boundary fill. And so we have a base piece, and we've got the cell phone holder, and then we just use freeform to create these shapes. And then we use boundary fill to turn it into a solid body. And that was one that I just kind of tossed together, but funny enough, I probably use it more than any of the others. There's a third one, which is one of the originals that we did in plasticity I don't even remember if it was the beta version or version 1, but just a very simple stand. And I actually keep that one on my desk here, and I just set my phone on it easy. And so I've made a bunch of different cell phone stands. I actually did it a series for Autodesk where we created a 2-part assembly. It was for a CNC series, that pieces that go together. And that's another one. Actually, I have a 3D printed version of it here. Probably not going to show up very well. But basically this piece goes in, and then it kind of sits, it sits like that, and then you could take it apart. I wanted to do more with that, but the restrictions and requirements for the video series I had to do kind of limited. But you could do something like that, and you could make both pieces hinge together or nest together so that it'd be flat. That would be kind of a nice thing to do. But again, these cell phone stands, they come in pretty handy. I've got a couple of them, again, at my desk in the bedroom, and I have one in the kitchen. It's actually the amplifier stand from our 3D printing course. I keep that one in a cabinet, and then if I need to use it for, watching a video or playing something while I'm cooking, then I can just get it out. The other thing that's kind of in the same vein, this is another one that I just designed for my own use, this is a charging stand for gizmo watches. And so these are like kids' cell phone watches. And basically I just made this because I needed to organize two of these things sitting on the kitchen counter, and also made little cable clips. And so these little cable clips have come in super handy as well. And so they print quick, just a minute or two, and you can feed two cables through them, and like it flexes, and then it keeps the cables pretty well organized. And so basically just had to come up with a way that I could put two of these watches next to each other. And like some things, I ended up scanning. Let's turn the edges off. I did just a very quick scan of this. Didn't even like clean it up or anything. You can see it's pretty nasty. And I just needed to know where the cable was and where the pins were and just the overall size of it. And so I just replicated that pretty quickly in Fusion, and I came up with the dock for it. Yeah, and so that's another one that just sits on the counter and just works. And there's no, I didn't make a video on it, but it just kind of helps. When you start to make stuff like this, you end up getting into restrictions where, like the cables and in this case the watches and the straps for the watches, and you just kind of have to work with where those things can feed to and where they can go, and that kind of dictates the overall size and shape. And it was nothing really special about this, but it worked for years until my kids got different watches, and I haven't made a new one. All right, the next thing is, again, something I just made for myself. This is a magnetic holder for a magnetic whiteboard. And so the thing with this is there's actually, let's see if I can do a section view. There's a cavity inside of here. And so what I did was we did a couple videos on pausing a 3D print. And the one I had was like a 3D printed sort of handle with a nut on the inside. But what I actually used that functionality for in practice was this thing. And so this is just a little clip. It's just got a little bit of a raised section here, and the magnet's inside. And so you can just slap it onto a refrigerator, or in my case, it's in the corner of a magnetic-based whiteboard. And so that way I can hold little cards like this Metro card here. You can just kind of hold little cards in that corner without them constantly falling over. And so that's something that just, I don't use it every day, but it's used every day, if that makes sense. It's just on the board, and it can hold stuff up. You can hold a little piece of paper or whatever. And that kind of functionality, that pausing a 3D print, dropping a magnet in, and having something that's completely enclosed like this is a super cool way to use 3D printing. And you can make them look pretty nice, especially if you're making these smaller objects. You use like a 0.2 millimeter nozzle, then you can get away from like really seeing that it's a 3D print in those layer lines. And if you use a textured build plate or a smooth build plate, it'll really change the look of that backside as well. And so again, that's just something that gets used all the time, even if we don't really use it specifically. Another thing that I use on a daily basis is drawer organizers. Now, these work pretty well in theory if you can do an entire drawer, but like junk drawers in kitchens tend to have a lot of junk in them. And so they get overrun pretty easily. And so I built a couple of these. This random tray is just one of them. And there are other ones that nest. We did a video on this in, I believe, Plasticity, where we made something like this to hold batteries. And so in my junk drawer, I've got a couple of trays for batteries. There's one just for pens and pencil, or two for pens and pencils. This was kind of a catch-all random tray that just fit around everything else. And I've got one for like a pair of scissors. And so this one ends up having like screwdrivers in it, and sometimes rolls of tape or different things like that. I also did like a over-the-edge coupon clip that kind of sits near these and ends up getting shuffled pretty far back in the drawer. But again, those little kinds of 3D printed organizers that fit in a custom space or have a shape to fit something custom. I know a lot of people do this for tools, and I've had requests. And if you're watching this video and you've requested this, I haven't forgotten about you. But if you, I've had requests for things like 3D scanning tools and then making a custom holder for that specific tool. And it's still on my list of things to do, but it's kind of the idea behind this. Now, when I did the tray for the scissors or for the other stuff, I just did pencil tracing. I didn't do any 3D scanning, and I just slapped it on a flatbed scanner and used that. All right, next thing on our list, you can see there's a long list, Nightlight Coaster. And so this was a video that I did in conjunction with PCBWay. And so we didn't do a design series for it per se. This was part of a product design video where we talked about the different steps that you follow, like prototyping and testing and design and so on. And so this is one that I actually used every day for a couple of years. I don't know how long ago I did that video, 2 years maybe. Recently, I haven't been using it as much. I actually did reprogram one of these with a sort of white and red candy cane theme for the holidays. And so it just kind of blinked back and forth. And then I also did one that just kind of animated a rainbow constantly. But I don't tend to use it as much because I ended up with just like a white noise machine that has a nightlight on it. And so there's not really a need to have two night lights, but I do actually take them out every once in a while and use them as just kind of place them in different places for like extra night lights. So I end up reprogramming a few of them. I have one sitting on my desk here. I have several of them that I built. And like I said, I did use them quite a bit for the first year or two. They just don't get used nearly as much anymore. All right, so next thing on the list, again, this was just one that I built for myself, but it's pretty handy. And so this is actually two pieces. This is a detergent bottle holder, and there's a lid that I made, which I'll show in a second. And so I use a laundry detergent that's Charlie's. It's a powder soap. And for a while, you could buy a plastic tub, and then we buy like refill bags of the powder. That the bags could be recycled. And so you just dump the powder back into the tub and you just keep using the tub. Well, use the tub for years, and the lid ended up cracking. And so every time you pick it up, it's hard to hold because of the size, and the lid was cracked, so you couldn't grab it by the lid. So I was just like, okay, well, I'll just make this container for it, this handle for it, and then that would be easier for it to grab. And I also printed a new lid that screws on, so got rid of the lid problem. And so this is an interesting one. I used a PLA tough material, and I didn't worry about keeping things thin wall. I just used infill for this. I printed the outside of it as solid, and then the handles would have infill in it. But the way that I designed this is there's a little kind of holder over here for the scoop that goes in, so it can hold the scoop on the outside. And then I just cut like a 1 millimeter gap in between the handle here. And so I printed this with support. So it did need support like on these overhangs here, because I didn't want to design it in a way that didn't need support, because I would need to do like a large arc or a V up there, and then this part of the handle needed some support. But anyways, with this PLA tough material, I was able to, after it was printed, flex it far enough out of the way that I could get the container into it and then screw it together. So I have basically a boss on the other side that ends up getting screw threads cut into it, and then this sort of counterboard area. And so that and the lid. So with that, I did scan the bottle. So I did scan the lid as well to get the thread reference. And so this is actually from the scan. This is the inside So the outside I actually cut away in quick surface and kept just the inside of it. And so that way I had a good reference for the thread. And it's just super simple, nothing too crazy. And I just did a single 360-degree thread, threads on, everything fits. I made sure to, to put enough gap in it that it worked. But that way I could just have a new threaded cap that goes on the top. And then I've got the sort of holder. So that way it's very easy to grab. We've been using it for probably a month or so now. And it's made it so much easier because that way when you reach up on the shelf, you've got a handle to grab onto and a cap. So again, these are, you can make the argument that we're using up plastic, in this case PLA, we're using up plastic, and so we're kind of creating or adding more to the problem, but also it gives us the ability to, like, I couldn't buy another lid for this container, so the only option would be to get another container if I could find one, and I haven't been able to find one. The grocery store just sells the refill bags. And so this is a way that we can keep using it by 3D printing a new lid, and the handle just functionally makes it a lot easier to use. And so, sometimes you can make these things, and again, just a one-off for personal use. All right, the next thing is interesting. So this one's been outside for a year, and this was a deterrent for chipmunks to keep them away from a bird feeder. And so I started designing it as a cone, and then realized, like, I don't need to print a gigantic cone. What if I just do this this platform? And so this piece is a secondary piece, and so this slides onto a bird feeder pole. And so the top of the bird feeder pole needs to come off, this slides on, and then the second piece goes on, screws and clamps down on the shaft. And there's like sections where it flares out, so it has something positive to go against. And so this one was printed in PLA CF, and it's been outside for a couple months at least. And it's done great. I mean, it sits in the sun. It's had snow, rain. Birds sit on it and use it. I've had a squirrel hop up and sit on it. Unfortunately, it wasn't big enough to deter the squirrels, but yeah. So it's worked. It's worked great, and it kept me it at least kept the chipmunks out of the bird feeder, and that was originally the main purpose. And so this is another very simple one, but PLACF has worked outside in the UV for me. It's not deformed. It hasn't come loose. It's still sturdy. It's still, it's not tweaking or bowing or anything. And it's not directly in contact with bird food or anything like that. So it's not really a big problem there. And so I think it works pretty well. All right. The next thing or things would be fidget toys. Now, we've done several videos on these. This fidget toy is actually one we haven't done a video on, but I'll put a link in the description. This is the one that I actually use. I'm not sure how it's going to come across on the video, but this is essentially the same as the fidget cone videos that we've done in both Fusion and Plasticity, just a slightly different take on it. So instead of the cone, the centerpiece here is, just essentially a cylinder, and then the outside piece, instead of that cone shape, is just kind of that hourglass shape. So it gives a pretty cool feel, and you can play with just the outside part or the inside part, or kind of, play with them together like a fidget toy. I have a couple of other 3D printed parts on my desk that I end up playing with from time to time. Just sitting in meetings, it can be pretty boring at times. So having little things to fidget with can be pretty handy. So this is one of those ones that I play around with. And again, I made it for myself. We didn't ever do a video on it, and printed a couple of them for my kids, and they work. All right. So the next thing, I didn't save it. So there's actually a lot of stuff that I 3D print that I don't actually ever save the file for some reason. And so I took some of the neon tubing that I originally had planned for the headlight for the GPZ build series, and I ended up going a different direction with that headlight. Obviously, we filmed it already. But this is just like simple clips that screwed into the back of an IKEA storage shelf and gave the ability to just clip the light on. And so very simple shape, nothing too special about it. fit into a specific spot in the corner, clipped in, and it holds the light there. So that gives like the little accent light. And so those kinds of little clips and pieces can be really easy to make, really quick to print, and then they serve a purpose. So it kept the light where I wanted it and kind of helped organize things. This next one is kind of a very similar thing. This is a desk clip or to sort of organize wires, and I've got a bunch of them on the back of my desk here. This was from that original Design for 3D Printing series on the Learn Everything About Design website. This was the first part we designed. And so, again, they print relatively easy, and they hold on to the desk just fine. It would be nice if it was a little bit like a rubber texture here or grippy, but it works. And, we've got some reliefs in the corner so it can flex a little bit easier. And this bump, the bump up piece here. And essentially we just put this opening here to kind of keep the consistent wall traces for it. But again, super simple part. You can print them depending on how thick or thin you make it in a couple minutes to, up to 10 minutes. And then they really help, especially when you've got like monitor cables and USB cables and all kinds of stuff running, underneath the desk. The desk that I'm sitting at, I don't put it in standing mode all that often, but it's a convertible desk. It goes up and down. And so having all those cables attached to the desk, except for in some places, means that I know that things aren't getting tangled when it moves. And so those have been super helpful. All right. The next one is another one that I printed. I've got a bunch of these things. And so this is a chip clip. And there are two versions of this. I made another one that's got kind of like a little, section where you can flex it open. It's not a true hinge, obviously. It's just deforming it. But so I've got two of these, that style and this style here, and I can put links in the description. If I didn't spend time like modeling it nicely, so don't dig too much into the timeline here. But the intent here, or the idea here, was that I always seem to be out of chip clips. Kids use chip clips for building forts and all kinds of stuff, and they just disappear. And so I ended up making these to try to just have a quick and easy version of a chip clip that we could use. Now, what I actually ended up using these for is in the freezer. So bags of frozen veggies and things like that, they work really well for that because they're low profile. You don't have stuff sticking way off of it. They are a little tricky to get on and off, and I've made a few versions, not just these two. I made another one that just had like a U shape on it. But essentially, if you fold the bag really tight, you can take your finger and push it on. And they're really secure. They hold those bags shut. And again, kind of low profile. And so I printed a bunch of these things. That way, these don't work really well for building things like forts with sheets, so they don't disappear. And so that way, I just always have a couple of these in the drawer where I can use them to, to hold bags shut. These will work on chip bags. They're just harder to use. And again, this is just a slightly different design. So I made the V shape to try to avoid having to use supports printing this. And really the big thing is just to make sure that there's overlap between the two shapes. And so that way it can, really bite onto whatever bag, it's grabbing onto. And so again, I'll put some links in the description for these. They're not, again, I didn't spend a lot of time modeling them cleanly. A lot of my own projects, and I'm actually planning on doing a video on this where we talk about like modeling the right way or the right now way, kind of more of a direct modeling hack approach. A lot of things that I make for myself that are just, quick projects, I won't spend a lot of time refining the model because I know that once I 3D print it, it's done. Like I'm not going to go back and do anything with it. And so a lot of times these designs, like if we roll back, you'll notice that I ended up taking this original design and just doing some tweaks to it. And in order to get these chamfers and things right, I just deleted faces and used direct modeling rather than going back and modeling those in a different way because it's kind of a unique shape that's on a curve back here. And it was just easier to use direct modeling. And, I probably could do a better job with things like the blends in the corners and stuff. But again, for just a simple 3D printed part that's going to live in a drawer or be in the freezer, it was just quick and easy to do it this way. And so that's something, again, I'm going to do a video about that in the in the near future. Another thing which gets used every day, which is I probably printed it years ago, again on that Ender 7, is a bottle clip for the refrigerator. And so very simple part, meant to be printed in this orientation. And so everything, it can be printed without support. And again, just simple geometry, nothing super special about it. But it clips onto the side of a tray or a drawer. I guess it's really like more like a shelf in the door of the refrigerator. And then it just has a way to keep taller, skinnier bottles from falling over every time you open and close the door. That's just something that always was annoying, and it's a problem that I had to fix. So I've been using these things for years for things like salad dressing bottles, barbecue sauce bottles, things that are tall and skinny that we get. It works out really well. And again, it's a nice way to really think about designing for 3D printing, because the orientation of the features and the way that the features get designed is important, so we can print it without supports and we don't have to do a bunch of cleanup. Another thing is something I actually did just probably a couple days ago, and this is a shelf that goes on the top of a TV to hold a little Roku box. And so some of these Roku boxes that I've had over the years, you can buy holders that either screw into the wall or sometimes they'll clip into like vents on the back of a TV. This one that I got, I don't even remember what model it was, but it came with just double-sided tape. And so at first I just stuck it to the top of the TV, but most TVs aren't flat. They'll have, obviously they're molded, so they'll be angled one way, angled another way, and then they kind of fall off on the back. And so there wasn't really anything for it to stick to. And unfortunately, because of the HDMI cables and stuff on the back, it just peeled up eventually, and it was pointing at the ceiling. And these things, this one at least is IR, so the remote has to point at it. So I needed a way to just hold it in the right orientation. And so this was another one of those like really quick designs. And so what I did was I didn't scan anything. I just measured it, and I created just a really thin section for the part that fit to the TV, and I printed it just a couple millimeters thick to make sure it fit. I could refine it from there. And then I created a version of it with the tray. Again, just some basic measurements. Now, this thing happens to be kind of like a funky shape. It's round, it goes out and then in. But I just made it so that there was a little, God, this constrained orbit is just driving me nuts. If you use constrained orbit, you need to pay really close attention to the orientation of the part. Otherwise, it can be a giant pain to rotate around. But again, I created a little section where it could drop into so that there was a lip on the front and the back to keep it in place. And then just some side sections to where it arcs back around where I could pop it into place. In this case, I actually slid it in from the front because the cables, have a way that they can kind of roll down the back and go on the TV. And so it's just another case of printing something or designing something relatively quick. Again, a little bit of kind of hack and slash. I used move copy to angle faces and get things to fit without really spending a lot of time in modeling it the right way, because it's a one-off. I'm going to print it once and it's just going to be used. So I don't really spend a whole lot of extra time on making a nice, clean, like fully parametric model if I'm just going to make it once. And so that's something that's important. Again, I'm going to talk about that in a future video. But that's the last of the things that I use every day. There are a couple of other pieces here that I do use quite a bit. Some you've seen, some you haven't. And so I'm just going to go through these sort of honorable mentions, and I'll try to put clips or pictures on the screen if I have them. Most of them I don't, because again, I kind of model it quickly. It's a one-off. This first one is a tree mount for a GoPro. And so when I'm out mountain biking, a lot of times I want to get trailside footage. And so what I had historically done is just taken the chesty strap off and wrapped it around a tree, clipped it on, and then done that. Now it ends up, if there's a small tree, it's kind of a pain. If there's a big tree, then you're really stretching it out. If there's a medium-sized tree, then you got to like wrap it around twice. It just turned out to be a kind of a pain. And so I built this thing, basically just used the standard GoPro mount, and it's printed, it's set up in a way that I can print it in this orientation without support. And so the orientation of the hex, for example, and then these supports coming up keep me from needing much support. The slots work just fine. It's probably not ideal to print them without support, but it worked okay. And then I just used an old chin strap from a helmet that I had crashed in. And so it works great. I can go around a large range of tree sizes, and I can just have it set up next to the trail, and it works. And in addition to that, the Fender, I don't know if I have that open. I may not have opened it, but the front fender, which we did a design series on, in addition to that. So I don't use them every day. This comes out depending on which trail I'm trying to film on. And so I don't use it every day, but I actually keep it in my hydration pack with me just in case. And then the front fender, now that it's winter and it's muddy, it just stays on my bike, and I've used it the past couple of weekends since we did the video. And it's working great. I do have a second version of that. I extended the front out a little bit, and so it's not the same one as from the video, but again, it's something I use. This next one's a bit weird. I will fully admit that. This is a 3D printed, I used PLA-CF wheel bearing. And so I've had this happen to a couple of lawnmowers where the wheel bearings have just completely blown apart and the wheel falls off. And for my current lawnmower, I could not find a wheel bearing locally. I just couldn't find one. And so I popped out some good wheel bearings that I had on the wheel that didn't fall apart, which they were getting ready to. And I just measured the ID and the OD. I ended up scaling the ID up a little bit. And then I just printed 4 of these things. I pressed them into the plastic wheel, and then they are just, basically eating away as sort of a sacrificial part. Now, if I could have found the actual wheel bearings in stock somewhere, I would have. I looked, and some that I found that I thought might work, they were like $20 a piece. So it was going to be $80 to just put some new wheel bearings on this mower. It wasn't worth it. I couldn't find any wheels that were direct size replacement either that have bearings in them. The bearings that go in these things are just super cheap. So this was like a temporary fix, but it got me through the summer, and I've just left them on. And so I'll kind of check them out this next summer and see if make sure they're not wearing down the metal. I doubt that they will. And then if they start to wear out and get wobbly, I'll just print some more and toss them in. And so that's kind of a weird one, but again, it got me back mowing that day. So I was able to quickly fix and get the mower working again. And then I ended up printing more and putting them on the other side. And then they've just worked, so I've just left them. The next thing is a plant tray. And so typically with potted plants, things like that, you'll have a plastic tray that comes with them. We've had a few that didn't have a tray, and we just needed something to help catch the water. Now, I know that these aren't going to, technically be like waterproof or water resistant, but really this was just a quick, toss it together. And I think I made a couple of them. Let's see what the other one is. So this was just basically a placeholder for the base size of the pot that I needed. And then I just created, the shape around the outside. And so again, just really quick, something that I could toss together to solve a problem when I didn't have anything here. And I didn't really want to go out and just buy like, a plastic plate or tray or something like that. So it was somewhat of a quick fix, but they've been in use for 6 months now and not really a problem. And most of the time the trays don't leak out, but the ones that I'm talking about weren't actually glazed on the bottom. And so we just need something extra to keep it up off the wood. And if any water does come out, a place for it to just kind of go. The next one, which may or may not be common, is bookmarks. And so I actually end up printing quite a few bookmarks, different designs for different people. This is like a, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Psy. And so you can make these things pretty thin. I don't even remember how thick this is. This is 1 millimeter. I've printed them thinner than this before. But in this case, these two these two pieces go over a page and this goes under a page. And as long as you don't make them too thick, they don't damage the pages. And I've made several of these different types, like mermaid tails coming out of the book, or dragon head, or we have a friend that's an author, and I used the character from her book series and made made one that comes out of the book for that. And so that can be kind of a nice way to use 3D printing to make something unique. And you could just do a very simple bookmark, obviously, but another way that you can make something unique that kind of is personal to somebody, right? So if you've got somebody that's like a Ninja Turtles fan, you could do this and put an R or something on there for their initial. So again, it's kind of just a neat little thing that you can do. They're relatively quick to print. They're thin, and you can customize them pretty easily. The next two, I can't remember if I did a video series on these or not. I feel like I did with the Mario block storage, maybe. But this is a Mario question block, basically a piggy bank. And it was made to use the lid from like a Quaker Oats grits container. It's that plastic lid that you can pop in. Now, obviously, you could design a screw-in lid or a pop-in 3D printed lid, but we just ended up taking grits containers and used the lid for the bottom of this, and then the rest of it actually used as a warp pipe. So made 3D printed tops for piggy banks like this, and it's just like a part so it looks like a warp pipe. And so those were pretty interesting. And then the Mario block storage ones, I feel like I maybe did this in a video, maybe not. But I printed a bunch of these things, and these ones are actually pretty big, like a decent size. I've printed them in 3 different sizes, but they work pretty well. I've got a few of them. My kids put all kinds of stuff in them, and so those are it's pretty nice. The next one, this is a game divider, and so what's interesting about this is this specific board game is called Flamecraft, and it comes with like a neoprene mat, like a desk mat, and a bunch of cards and different things. And it doesn't really have any way in the box to organize it. Some games you get and they're really well organized. There's a place for everything to go. This one was kind of not like that, and people sell wooden versions of organization things all the time. But basically what we did is we just kind of figured out the shape and size of the box and all the things that we needed to store in it. So this is actually where the roll-up board goes. You roll it up and put it between these two. And you got different pieces and obviously cards that go in here. And the top of this ended up breaking, but that was like a castle. And then this had some more pieces on it. And so when you look at this, you just have to design it for 3D printing. And, there's as an extra piece that goes underneath this. Let's hide this one. To hold a couple of extra pieces, like little money coins and that. And so if we hide some of these other things, let's hide that and we'll show this. And so when you're playing it, you can keep all this, you can take these out and you can have all the stuff organized. And then this is like a little handle so you can slide out the extra pieces that go underneath it, and it all fits back in the box. And so this is actually a pretty good use case for desktop 3D printing. If you've got a board game or something like that where you need to organize the pieces. Now, I made some of this stuff bigger and thicker than it needs to be just so that it would fit in the box. This piece is probably thinner than it needs to be, and if I did it again, I would make it probably a bit thicker. But in general, I think as a use case for desktop 3D printing, I think this is a good one because you can make these little parts and features to organize, your toys and games and so on. The next one that gets used every day, but it's not kind of like a touch object. It's not something that you physically use every day, kind of like the board game storage thing, is this earbud holder. And we did a video series on this a couple years ago, but these have been in use since then. And basically it's just a plastic piece, you 3D print, it goes on top of the wall wart plug, and then it holds like a watch, or in this case, it's a earbud case. And so, that's something that it just functions. It's just there. It's used every day, just kind of inadvertently, kind of like the magnetic clip piece. And I think that may be the last thing. Oh, there's two more things. I'll toss those up as pictures. One was the Bamboo Labs printers. They have that little piece that comes out the back. Everybody calls it poop. And so when I first got mine, I just did like a toilet to sit in the back of it as kind of a joke. It does catch it about 50% of the time, but those things don't just come out of that chute. Sometimes they shoot out. So it just kind of sits back there as a little joke. My kids think it's funny. And the last one is a game that is little Goombas. I modeled those in Blender, not in Fusion. But basically you take the sort of the Koopa shell and you slide it and you knock them over. And so that's kind of fun to set up and play on like a desk or a table or something. And so the whole point of this is there are a lot of things that you can design as one-off parts using, in this case, like on the screen, 3D scanning and 3D printing, or just if you're trying to fix a problem. So we've got like the plant tray or the mower bearing. These are things that there was an immediate need, and the 3D printing solved the problem, whether it's a short-term or a long-term solution. Same thing with like the detergent bottle handle. It's something that has been a frustration for probably years, and just ended up eventually, making something. Microwave handle, bathroom vent fan. These are things that, had I not had the option to make this part quickly, maybe iterate it or make changes to it, I would have had to replace the microwave, and then that microwave would sit in a dump somewhere, right? It would just get thrown away. And so while we are using plastic when we are printing, I know PLA is supposed to be made from corn, but there's a whole, there are just issues around the creation of it, and obviously the waste that gets created as well. But if we can use these tools, the design tools, scanning if we need to, or just measurement and 3D printing, to kind of keep some of this stuff going, make our lives a little bit easier, like the key fob holders or the wireless chargers or the cell phone stands. We can make these custom parts that are just one-off for ourselves, or we make them for friends or whatever the case. I'm not saying that we mass produce these things, but we can make stuff that fits our need and our use case and makes our day a little bit easier, whether it's a cell phone stand or whether it's a handle for the detergent bottle, or to keep stuff from falling over in the fridge. We can make these little one-off pieces, or again, share them with a community or friends or whatever, and use the technology to solve these little problems. Now, at the end of the day, you can use 3D printing for a ton of stuff, and it's not just these little things. But I thought it was interesting when I started looking at all the things that I've printed, made, whether it's been in a video or not, and I use on a daily basis. I thought it would be nice to kind of just share and show those things so you can get an idea of maybe some things you can make on your own. Maybe make a variation of what you saw here, or maybe it sparks an idea for something new. In the new year, again, we're going to be making more content just like we always do. I have a large list I'm going to try my best to get through, but the problem is I can come up with 10 video ideas every day and not get to 9 of them. So I'm going to do my best to prioritize stuff, prioritize some of the projects I'm working on, the car, motorcycle, things like that, and hopefully make progress on all fronts. But if there's anything that you want to see or any questions you have, leave a comment. If you like this kind of content, this is a bit different, is more of a review video. But if you want to learn how to make some of this stuff, check the description of the video. I will leave links to the wireless charger, the key fob, and some of the other stuff that I covered that we've done on the channel already. And if you want to see something new, leave a comment and let me know. But as always, thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next one.